All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Greatness Tribe. Today I have Toni Anderson on the show. Toni, I met a couple of years ago, and she really stuck out to me, and I'm so excited to be introducing her to you guys. Toni is a millionaire mom of seven, founder of thehappyhousewives.com, theoilcollection.com, profitableaudience.com, and sellersummit.com. Toni is a pro at communication, connection, and building profitable relationships in your business. Wow, Toni, that's a lot of stuff. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Toni, like I said, we met a couple of years ago, and I was just, marveling at how you do what you do, having seven children, running all these businesses. Can you give us a little bit of a background about I guess, like how your life got started, really?
Sure. So I actually got started in the blogging world because I had all these little kids and I always figured I was unemployable
Wait, hold on,
because
let's back up.
sorry, back
You're
up
a
even
military
further.
mom, right?
I was, yeah, military wife. Yep.
Military, okay, military wife. So,
Yeah.
okay, first of all, like, how did you grow up? Were you like in a business savvy family? Like, what was your background?
No, so I grew up, my dad was actually in commercial real estate and my mom, she just kind of had like mom jobs. I hate to say that way, but I think she worked at our school and then she worked as like a secretary. And so she worked through my childhood, but I don't really remember much about, she was kind of always home when I got home from school and things like that. So I definitely didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial family, but I would say I grew up in a very hardworking family.
Mm. So then you married someone in the military.
I did. So I got married when I was 20, so I was pretty young,
Yeah.
and we immediately moved overseas, and it was like a culture
Oh
shock because
my
I'd
gosh.
I'd never been out of the well, I'd never been out of the country. I think that I'd remembered. So it was a huge culture shock because we moved to Panama, the country,
Oh
and
wow.
it's not like getting to go to Italy or Japan. It was definitely not like the best of best, but it was a really good learning experience for me to become super independent really quickly.
Oh.
And so he was in the military. We were married and he was in the military for 22 years. And then he
Oh wow.
retired 6 years ago. So, throughout that time, we had kids and we bounced around and we moved like every 18 months to 2 years. So having a real job wasn't really an option for me because you just can't go somewhere and know that you're going to leave in 18 months and think you're going to get some sort of corporate type, be in the corporate environment.
So, like, does a military family need a dual income? Like, how does that work if people are moving around like that? Like, what is the expectation kind of?
I I guess I would say yes, I think they do. They don't pay military people a whole lot of money. Not to say my husband did end up getting a lot of promotions. So by the time he retired, he was making very good money in the military. But when you're first starting out, it's definitely not a way to get rich or a way to really have a lot of extra money. You definitely have to pinch your pennies as you're starting out.
Okay, okay. So basically, you guys were moving around. You needed another income, and I just want to comment. Like, you have seven kids. Like, I mean, I'm part of a religious Jewish community. Okay, so that's pretty common. But
Yes.
in the secular world, it's really like not common. So did you like always just love kids? And tell me more about that.
I joke, I don't love kids at all, actually.
That's hilarious. Stop
I
it.
love my own. No, and we always joke that my husband wanted no kids and I wanted three, and so we're really bad at math when we compromised and ended up at seven.
Oh
Yeah,
my God.
I didn't think we would have a big family. That's just definitely. I grew up. I'm one of three kids, and I
Oh
loved
wow.
being one of three. Part of a lot of it was, being a military family, moving around every couple years. We kind of felt like our friends were all that each other. Our kids were all the friends that they had at times because
Oh
every time you're
wow.
moving, you're going to a new place, you have to meet new people. And my kids are great about fitting in and meeting kids, but at the same time, like they always had each other in the process. So
Wow.
that was one of the things that we thought about when our family kept getting bigger, that it was nice that they had built-in friendships whenever we moved. But at the same time, it definitely complicates things when you're trying to move up a household of nine people
Oh my
because
gosh.
yeah, I mean, like you have so much stuff when you have any kids, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. So but I think all of that prepared me to like start a business because
Yeah.
I was always sort of organized. I'm sure my parents would say of the three kids, like I was the most organized, but I became like crazy organized, crazy efficient, because I had to be. And my sister jokes that she's like, "You're the cleanest person I know." And I said, "Well, I'm not." And she said, "Well, it's probably because you had to be, because you always had like all these irons in the fire. So you always created all these systems to help you get things done, because you couldn't just wake up and try to figure out what you were going to do that morning. You had to know the night before, because as soon as you woke up, there were people that needed you."
Okay, can we just dive into that? Because I love what you just said. You said you were not naturally the most organized person, and then you learned how to be. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, because I actually was thinking also, I was like, okay, she must have gotten organized through having all these kids and then was able to start all these different businesses. Like, what were the kind of what kind of systems did you start putting into play, and how did your life kind of change?
So I think it changed. Honestly, it changed with like the fourth kid. I think up until the
Okay.
fourth kid, I still was winging it a lot of the time. But then when I got the fourth one, and my third and fourth are really close together, I think I realized that I'm so outnumbered. And I had three boys in a row, and my boys, I love them, but they are 100% boy, like
Wow.
destructing.
Yeah.
There's nothing they can't destroy. They fought all the time with each other. It wasn't like, oh, my kids are all so wonderful. They weren't. They were little monsters most of the time.
That's
So I
hilarious.
realized that if I don't get my act together, this is going to be a complete disaster. And so I think when that fourth one came along, I was like, okay, like, what do I need to do? Like, what are the main things I need to do every day to survive? And I think this works in business too. Like, what are the core components that have to be done every day? And that's what I always started my day with. Okay, they need to eat. They need to either get to school, or we homeschool them too. So it's like, we need to do school, and we need to make sure that we know where all the important things are, like wear your coats, wear your boots, whatever. And so
Okay,
that's what
wait,
I
can you just
started
say that
with.
again?
Yes,
Because I did read that you homeschooled your kids,
I did.
but
Yeah.
what do you mean? How did you do this? Seriously.
Honestly, because now my kids are in school this year, and they've been off and on like throughout their educational journey. And there's many days that I wish we still homeschooled, because there's a lot of components of homeschooling that I felt were easier, because at
Really?
least then, well, once your kids go to school, and I like, God bless public school teachers, like, good. I can't even imagine being a teacher right now in this environment with everything so crazy. But when your kids are home, like, you're in control of your whole day. As soon as your kids go to school, if the teacher decides to give an extra project, or there's a homework assignment, or I don't know if your kids have done this, but my kids will come home and be like, "I need brownies for tomorrow." Right?
Yeah. Oh,
It,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so your day is totally out of your own control, because whatever the kid decides to remember to tell you, or the teacher decides to assign, you have to then figure that out on the fly. Whereas with homeschooling, I could really stay organized and kind of plan out our week. And I knew like Fridays, my kids didn't want to do school anyway. So we would load up like Monday, Wednesday. So I just had a bunch
Mm.
of, it's all about systems for me. So I had systems in place that helped us get things done, so that on Friday we could take the day off and go to like the museum or the park or something fun.
So you would like sit there and think through like what wasn't working and then make a plan
Yes.
and follow through on that?
Yeah.
You're so cool. That's amazing. And okay, because the one thing I would say is that you, when I met you, like you did not strike me as like an overwhelmed, out of shape mom with all this stuff. Like you were like, you look like you really take care of yourself. Like you develop your own personal, mind and what you're doing. Like, how did those pieces fit into this too?
There was a while that I wasn't like that. I sort of
Mm,
lost myself in everything that was going on. And I think that's sort of a challenge that's not unique to females, but I definitely think that we put so much effort into these other things in our lives, whether it be raising our kids, homeschooling our kids, a job, our house, whatever it is, that you tend to lose like what's truly important. And I can remember, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Hyatt. He's a
of course.
motivational, I don't know what his official role is, but
I know. I was thinking that. I don't know what his official role
author,
is.
maybe, I don't know, motivator. I was at a conference, and he actually keynoted at one of my conferences years and
Oh,
years
wow.
ago. And then a couple years later, I was at a conference and he was speaking again. And I've always really liked his speaking style.
Yeah.
And he gave this talk about how if you don't put yourself first, and that not necessarily like being selfish, but if you don't put yourself first, then you can't possibly take care of the people around you. And he said he had us make this list. It was actually really troubling. He had us make this list of the things that people would say about us at our funeral.
Mm.
And I don't like those exercises, because I don't really want to confront any of my own personal issues. Like, I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good. And so we made this list, and when I was looking at the list, like there were things like organized and efficient, but there were a lot of things on there that I felt like I wanted in my life that weren't, like, I don't think people would say about me. And it sort of hit me on the, like, basically like on the side of the head, kind of like, you need to get your act together for yourself,
Wow.
because one, your kids are all going to grow up and go away, right? So
Yeah.
who are you once your kids are gone? So that was the first thing for me. And then the second thing was, if I can have all these things and have achievements and do things, but if I'm not personally happy or fulfilled, then what does it matter when I'm 65 or 70, right? And I don't have all these businesses anymore because I retired or sold them or whatever it would be. And I remember sitting there thinking, I need to start thinking about myself the same way I think about my kids and my businesses, and create a plan for myself.
Wow. So what did that look like?
So I immediately got a personal trainer,
Oh,
because I
okay.
knew I needed, and I wasn't like out of shape or any. It was just like, I need someone to motivate me
Yeah.
externally. I need the external motivation, because I think with a business, money is sometimes an external motivator, right? Or success or sales, things like that. But I was like, well, for fitness, like, sure, I can get up every day and walk around my block, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
And 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 like with that, is you can get up and do that, but you're not going to see results right away either. So then the chance of getting frustrated and giving up is really high. And I thought, if I have a trainer that's just like, honestly, I hired someone to yell at me.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah,
I mean, that's
just
why we
just
hire coaches,
right.
to
Yeah.
get us, yeah.
Get me to that point. And so that was probably one of the best things I've done in my life, because I only hired this guy for like 6 months, but I needed just 6 months of someone saying, get in the gym and do this, get in the
Wow.
gym and do that. And that was really helpful for me, because the more I started caring about how I felt physically, like, I didn't want to be the tired mom, right? And the
Mm.
one thing that I always hated that people said to me was, oh, like, you look so good for a mom. And I was like, well, I want to look so good for a person. I don't want
That's
the
so
standard
funny.
to be like, why do moms look so bad that you get a compliment when you don't look bad? Like, I
That's
just,
hilarious.
so that kind of
Yeah.
stuck with me. So I got the trainer. I started getting up early, even earlier, and just started creating my own like regimen. So even today, like, I eat the same thing for breakfast, I eat the same thing for lunch, which is kind of crazy, but it works. And I just kind of keep this schedule for myself so that I know, one of the things I do is I like to read a lot. And I feel like the more I do those things, the better mom that I am, the better person that I am, the better business owner I am, because I'm not just solely like in that business or in my kids' lives all the time. I'm myself, right? I have this whole other life without all these other things.
So what does happen when, let's say, the kids do come home with a test or they need the brownies tomorrow? Like, how do you juggle that right now with all the businesses and, your self-care?
So I think it's important to have margin. And I actually read, there's a book called Margin. I don't know the author off the top of
Mm.
my head. And I read that book about that same time in my life when I was realizing that I needed to start focusing on being healthier. And I realized that my life ran on zero margin. So,
Yeah.
which I think is
Yeah.
most people,
Yeah.
right? Any
100%.
disaster just completely throws you off. And I didn't like that either. I didn't want to feel like I was always on the proverbial, hamster wheel kind of thing. And I made commitments. So one thing I was so bad at before is I would take my laptop to bed every night. Right. I would just carry it upstairs or wherever my bedroom was, and I would get on it, and I'm just going to finish a couple things. I'm just going to get on my phone and check my email, just these little things. And I just decided that like everything stayed in my office. So once I
Mm.
left and I actually bought a desktop computer
Oh,
that
that's so
because
funny.
I know myself, and I'm like, well, I'll take it upstairs, but I won't open it. Right. I'd make little deals with myself, or I'll open it, but it'll just be for 10 minutes. And then like 2 hours later, you're still on the computer.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so one of the things I did is I made sure I had a dedicated office space, and that way I can shut the door. My kids know if I'm in here, I'm working. If I'm not in there, it's fair game. Even if I'm in the other room with my laptop, I'm fair game for them. But they know if I'm in my
Ah.
office. And back when I didn't have an office, I used to put a hat, like a ball cap on.
This is what I've
That's
been
what they
telling
tell
this to
you.
people. Yeah. Okay, so tell us.
So when I didn't have an actual dedicated office space, I would put a ball cap on, and that would be a signal to my kids that I was working and that I could not be interrupted unless they were bleeding or, broken bone sort of thing. And they really learned that that was a boundary for them, and I made sure that when I wasn't working, I didn't keep the hat on, because they knew that I wanted to be available to them. That's one of the reasons why I liked to build my businesses, is because I wanted to be around for my kids. But I also realized that at some point you've got to have like the business time. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would, keep the hat on when I was working. And then when I got my own office, the rule was like door shut. If my door was shut, that was a sign that they could not come in. If my door was open, it means I'm working, but you can interrupt me. So I tried to create these boundaries for them that they knew when was a good time, when was a bad time. And I think that was really helpful because I know a lot of moms who work and say like, I can't get anything done with my kids, and their kids are like 14 and 16. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay, yeah.
yeah.
At that,
No.
like, you gotta train them though. You've got to train your kids and sometimes your spouse that that's not a good time to, have a conversation with you.
Well, I think that the clarity is just, the winner, because I love that what you just said. Like, if the door is open, you can interrupt me, but I'm still working. If the door is closed, like I think that just having those rules for the kids, for yourself and for your husband, that's just a game changer. So, sitting down and making those rules. I want to ask you, I didn't even get into what businesses you actually run, but I do want to just ask you a little bit more about like kind of juggling the parent thing with the business thing. How did you We didn't even get into how you started. Maybe you could tell us now, but how do you physically start a business and have 7 children home doing homeschool and like take care of their curriculum and have time for that? Like, I don't understand that physically.
So I will say I was homeschooling before I started a business. And I
Okay.
think with anything, by the time I started a business, I had already been homeschooling for 6 or 7 years. So it
Okay.
wasn't, so I think there's a big difference. Like and I feel for all these parents who like just now have to homeschool, right? That were never intending on homeschooling and they're trying to like figure this out. Like it's hard, but I got to work my way up to that hard, right? I didn't start homeschooling with 7 kids. I started homeschooling one kid, right? And then the next kid.
Okay.
So there's like this slow growth, right? And you have this time to learn. You have time to learn of like, okay, what curriculums do I like? What don't I like? How do you teach math? Oh, I can't teach math. I need to hire a tutor. That happens slowly. So when I
Mm,
started my business, I had already been doing this for 6 or 7 years with the homeschooling. So it wasn't quite a shock. Now, what was a shock was all the business side because I had had odd jobs and things like that, but I'd never had a true job before.
yeah.
And so that was a little bit of a learning curve. But I will say in the beginning, and I hate this, I hate telling people this because I see so many people that their lives get totally out of whack. But when I got started, I would get up at 4 in the morning and I would work from 4 to 8 in the morning. And then I would work again from probably like 3 to 6 at night on the business.
Okay. How did you do that
Yeah.
and not fall apart, honestly?
I was I mean, I don't think that's necessarily healthy to do. But it fits my personality a little bit. And it really was the only time because when I started, I didn't even have baby number 7. And my last 4 are all like stair step kids. So I'm trying to think how old my oldest would have been maybe 8 or
Oh
10,
my gosh.
maybe 10, and then they kind of went down from there. So I didn't have time during the day. Like you can't tell a 1-year old that a hat means they can't come in your
No,
office, so you
no.
have nap time and you have bedtime. And I realized like my kids, thank goodness, they never woke up early. So I knew from 4 to 8 in the morning I could get up and no one would be around, no one would interrupt me. And that was really and I'm not a morning person, I don't like to get up early, but I realized if I wanted to start a business, that was the time that I had that I could make it work.
So, what time did you go to bed?
Probably like 10. So, I mean, not great. It's not, that's why I don't like saying that because I do feel like there was some unhealthy moments in that. But I also feel like if you view it as it's a season, it was like when I started my e-commerce business. For the first maybe year of my e-commerce business, I worked back like I did when I was starting my blog.
Okay.
But I knew
So
that if
right.
I could, get the momentum and make the sacrifices now, then I could have more balance on the other side. I think the danger is that once you get into that cycle of really overworking, it's really hard to get out of that cycle and be okay with a slower level of growth or a different pace because you sort of condition yourself and your mind and your expectations to be working like crazy all the time.
So I do want to actually ask you about that because I speak to a lot of parents who kind of use work as a little bit as an escape. It's
Yeah.
a lot more fun, to sit in front of your computer and see the dollar bills rolling in and use your creative outlets. Did you ever have that where you kind of like did run to your office to like just get away from the madness and whatever? And how do you find the balance now? Because it feels to me when I speak to you like your family is your priority.
Yeah. So it's really tough. And I think if you live in the world of like e-commerce or digital marketing, anything in that space, it's it's a rush, right? I can remember the first year I started in e-commerce and I had the Shopify app on my phone, and you know how it will ding you when you get a sale? Like that's almost like being on a drug because
It
you hear
is.
the ding, and then you're like, "Oh, I got to do more. I got to do this. I got to do that. I
Yes.
didn't have the upsell. I got to go put the upsell in. Like I'm doing this right now. I don't care that dinner is on the stove." And I was doing the same thing because there's so much excitement. And the reality is you don't get that kind of validation as a mom, and you don't get that kind of validation in real, like no one's dinging you every 5 minutes telling you how awesome you are, right? That doesn't happen.
That's
So
so funny.
it's really tough to find that balance because there's so much immediate gratification when you're selling things or you see an ad campaign doing well, things like that. And your kids can go for months and not appreciate you at all, which is just, I mean, that's part of having kids, right? They would
Right.
appreciate, I have
Absolutely.
older kids now. They do appreciate you when they get to their 20s and have their own children.
Oh,
Then
that's
they,
so
then they
nice.
really appreciate you because they see how hard it is. But so I think the thing that you have to remember is that with a business, I do think if you're getting started or you're in that path, you have to work hard at it, right? No one just launches something and has amazing luck and doesn't have to lift a finger. But at the same time, at the end of the day, most people that I know who want to build their own business do it because they want to have a lifestyle with their family. And then if you end up sacrificing that for the business, then you're kind of, why not just go back to corporate and get
Yeah.
insurance benefits, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so I
Yeah.
think that's what you have to keep in your head is that you're doing this because you want a certain lifestyle. So don't sacrifice the lifestyle long term.
So you're kind of constantly checking yourself, is what
Yeah.
you're saying, like just being in touch with yourself. Okay. And another question is, what you, so you mentioned the hat. You
Hmm.
mentioned actually to me when we met about taking like a solid day or two of the week where you would
Yep.
just like work. Can you tell me about that? Because I do want to know more about strategies for just making it work as a parent with also a successful business.
Yeah. So I think that's really important. And that's something I didn't do early on. I wish I would have done it earlier. Is that I think when I was probably 8 years in, 6 years in, I realized that I needed the whole like work in the morning, work during nap time works. But the reality is like interrupted work like that isn't the way to be the most productive. And I thought, okay, if I could have one day a week where I just only had to focus on work. I didn't have to check anybody's math. I didn't have to make any meals. I didn't have to worry about anything. I think I could get so much done. And so I hired a college student I actually ended up taking my kids to her house
Oh,
because she lived on a farm and it was super fun for the kids. But
no way. That's
yeah, but
awesome.
you could obviously have someone come in your house too. If you had a space, you could go. And so basically I started her at one day a week and I ended up having her come twice a week. And I think she came from like 8:30 to 4, and she basically was completely in charge of, I never left my office. I think I
Oh,
snuck out maybe to get lunch, but I just stayed in there all day. And it works for two reasons. One, you get this huge chunk of uninterrupted time. And as someone who has been used to working, like I have an hour, I have 2 hours,
yeah.
you will be amazed at how much you can get done in 8 hours. You're like, how do people
Oh,
need to work
wow.
40 hours a week? I can get everything done in 8 because you're so used to all these interruptions. And then the other thing was I knew that though that was my only day and then my only 2 days. So I didn't get on social media. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check text messages. I didn't communicate with anybody that wasn't part of whatever I was doing. And so that forced me to be super, super focused on those 2 days. And I was able to get done what most people can get done in a week. Because if you think about, when I had used to do coaching clients, I used to challenge people to track their time for 1 week. And I was like, how much time are you on Facebook? How much time are you on Instagram? How much time do you spend responding to emails that don't matter? And everyone at the end of the week was always shocked because you think it's not a lot, but then when you actually track it, it's usually hours and hours and hours. And when you cut all that out and you just say, today I'm completely focused on optimizing my listings, I'm going to focus that and I'm going to focus on my ad campaigns. You'll get all of that done in a day because
So,
you don't do anything else.
and did you not work the rest of the time? The rest of
I
the
did,
week?
but I worked in chunks. I would work,
You
when in
okay,
the
back to the chunks.
afternoons or yeah, or in the mornings, but I knew that I had those 2 days. And then I spent those times where I had the chunks to do, I call it like the mindless work, checking emails, worrying about these little things that truly could go for a couple days and not be touched and my business would still run. And that's when I used that time because I was less focused. I was less, my brain wasn't working the same way. I wanted to use those big chunks of time to really work on being creative or thinking outside the box. And I actually did this. I don't think I talked about this at Seller Summit, but it was about that same time I wanted to do that. I wanted to rework my whole email strategy. And I basically locked myself in my office for 3 days. And I
Wow.
like had the walls were covered with post-it notes. And I was like, I'm not leaving my office. I'm not doing anything else until I revamp this email strategy. And I ended up I think I did 127 emails that I wrote out,
Oh,
had
wow.
everything, but that's all I did because I still use it today. Right. So it was a great use of those 3 days because I just go in and tweak it now.
Wow.
But I think those are the things that you need that big chunk of time to get done because they take so much brain power and they take all that creativity that you don't tend to have when oh, I've got 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes
Yeah.
you go take care of your customer service stuff or whatever.
And so, did you feel like your kids ever felt like resentful in any way or just annoyed that you're always like, have this business on the side, or what was their kind of reaction?
Yeah, I want to say no, they love it. Uh, it depends. I think I was always real honest with them and saying because the other thing was when I started really working a lot, like, we didn't need the money. My husband makes good money, like we didn't need that to live. But I wanted to let them know like, hey, I want you to know that if you want to go work a desk job and be in a company, that's great. But if you want to start your own thing, that's great. And I really wanted to see that there were like different things that they could do in their life. And I wanted to be a good example. So I always was very open and honest. I can remember when I started selling on Amazon, like we'd look at the Amazon dashboard together and then
Oh,
we'd talk about, okay, this is how much the product costs. This is how much Amazon takes. And, they were kind of like, wait a second, like this is a good way to make money or this, kind of being real upfront with them about those things so that they could see how the business worked. And I wasn't just because I remember once one of my kids was like, my mom's on Facebook all day. And I was like, oh, I'm not really on Facebook all day. And you
oh,
think you don't want
yeah.
that. You don't want them to come home from school with like that thing that they do in class where it's like, my mom likes to lay in bed and drink wine or whatever, like they
Right.
so I was like, I'm not on Facebook all day, I promise. So I started giving them more insight into what I was doing and also letting
Interesting.
them know, like, hey, the reason why you got a car when you're 16 is because I have a job.
Hmm.
Right. And the reason why we live in the house we live in is because I also have a job. And just kind of letting them know that the work that I'm doing is directly impacting their life as opposed to just, oh, mom likes to spend all day on the computer.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I really like that. I think that's very valuable. Would you take us just through the different businesses that you have, kind of what you do, and I guess like how this all came to be?
So I actually got started. So I had like a mom blog years and years ago where I don't know if you're probably not even old enough to know this, but where you just basically wrote like what you did all day with your kids.
Yes, I
And
do remember
yeah.
that actually.
So I started doing that because I've always loved to write and I felt like, oh, it's kind of like an online diary. This seems fun. And I'm sure no one read it. I don't know. I
Oh,
mean, it
that's funny.
wasn't even like back when you were thinking about those things. But throughout the process, my husband actually deployed to Iraq
Oh, wow.
and came home and he had an injury that we thought might prevent him from being able to stay in the military.
Oh,
And so I started to, and I'm a planner by nature. So I started to panic and I'm thinking, okay, we have 6 little kids. My degree is in political science, so totally useless.
right,
Uh, my only real job was as a bartender, also totally useless because I don't
right,
want to go back doing that with
right.
6 kids. Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And he might not have a job anymore. So what can I do that could make us some money? And the only thing I could think of was, well, I really like to write and I have this website. So what if I like figured out a way to make money from the website? But this was back in 2007 when
Mm,
people just weren't making money. Like it's not like today where there's a lot of people that are doing really well in the online space. But I thought, well, there's got to be a way. There's got to be something. I didn't know about affiliate links or anything like that. And so I basically transitioned the mom blog into the Happy Housewife, which is how I got started in the online space. And had that, it grew. I was fortunate I got in early, which I think does make a difference with most businesses is, there weren't a lot of mom bloggers back in the day. And I grew that and that ended up spinning off into a blog conference for bloggers that I ran.
Oh.
And then I ended up doing a lot of consulting for major brands like Cox Media and Kohl's and Sears, because they wanted to know how to market to moms. And I
So
was
how did they find you? Because I did see that. I mean, you have some really, like, you worked with Kraft, with
yeah,
Kmart, Macy's, Kohl's, Southwest, Visa prepaid. How did that happen?
I think they find, I mean, back in the day, they would find you just because you had a popular site, and they would probably Google search and look for mom bloggers. And then the interesting thing is, once you get in with one brand, then you just work with all of them. It sort of snowballs,
Okay.
which then led to the consulting, which I actually really enjoyed. But then I was traveling all the time, and I thought, well, I started this so I didn't have to get a job, and now I'm gone all the time with consulting. So I sort of defeated the purpose of being at
What was that
home.
consulting?
I was consulting for Cox Media. So I was basically going to all their partners and talking about how to, campaigns for moms. And this is when Pinterest was coming out. So how to run on Pinterest and doing all these things, because they wanted, they're e-commerce brands, right? So
Right.
they want to know, how do you get influencers to write about you in a way that causes moms to click and buy from you?
And how did you know? Just through your blog?
Yeah, just being in that space for several years at that point. And I think I have a knack for marketing in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's funny, once you run a couple successful campaigns, then everyone wants to work with you too. And
Yeah.
it's like with anything in e-commerce, like once you have a successful product, it's easier to get another successful product versus starting from zero. And so then I started doing that. And funny enough, I ended up meeting Steve Chu, who's my business
Right.
partner, at a conference. And I was getting burnt out on the consulting. I was getting burnt out on the traveling. I still love the consulting. And he started talking to me about what he did. And
What conference was that?
it was called World Domination Summit in Portland, Oregon. It's kind of a crazy conference, but
What is that?
it was kind of like it was like kind of a Tony Robbins-ish thing.
Oh, that's so funny.
Which is
Okay.
funny because that's not my or Steve's
Right,
personality.
not at
But
all.
we had a lot of friends that were going, so we were like,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
we'll go.
funny.
And then we ended up meeting each other through a mutual friend, and we met, and it was kind of like, oh, nice to meet you, great. We hung out a little bit, but then after I came back home, I looked him up, and I was like, he talks about e-commerce. What in the world's e-commerce? Because I only knew it on the affiliate side. Like, I promote your product,
Mm,
you pay me 10%. And then I realized that like regular people sold on Amazon, and that if you go to some store online, that it wasn't like a big corporation. It could be someone filling orders in their garage. Like, I just had no clue that that was this world. And I think I ended up emailing him or something, and I said, do you have a coupon code for your course? Because I didn't want to pay full price. And he's like, yeah, 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 that's fine. And I ended up taking his course, and I thought, well, this is crazy. Like, I should do this. I already have an audience. I understand the marketing side. I understand email. I just don't know what to sell, and ended up coming up with my jewelry and
So
launched
he
my,
tells that story. He tells a story about
yes.
Toni Anderson, who came up with this jewelry idea, and within a couple of, well, it was like one Christmas season, you guys
Yeah.
made, what was it, 200,000 or what?
Oh
I don't even
yeah.
remember what
Yeah.
the number.
Yeah. It was crazy.
How did you come up with that idea? It's really cool. So it's like an aromatherapy jewelry,
Yeah.
right? So it's like diffuses, or is it those little pads that you put in that
Yep.
diffuse?
And
Is
the
super cool.
chains. Actually, I think I have one sitting on my desk. I'm in the middle of Christmas inventory. But yeah, it's funny. So I have a business partner in that business, not Steve,
Okay.
someone else. And I had been talking to her because we were renovating my house together. And so I was talking to her about, I think I want to sell something, but I'm not sure. And I was like doing all the Jungle Scout research and all those things. And one day she came over and she said, I saw this on Etsy. She's like, what do you think if we did something, but we made it better and we did this and that? And she had this little locket. And I was like, what in the world is this? And she's like, well, you put essential oils in it. And I'm thinking, okay, and so I started doing research, and there was just nobody selling it at the time. So we were
Oh,
very
really?
fortunate. Like,
I
it
would get
hadn't
kind of
hit.
nervous too, because I was like, nobody's selling it. Maybe nobody wants it. That's like one of the indicators in the market. So you just felt that that was the right thing.
I felt like it was because all my friends used essential oils, right?
Oh,
So it was kind of
okay.
like, well, maybe it's no one's selling it because no one's thought of it, right?
Yeah.
And so we launched, and that's the thing, I feel like people struggle to get to the launch point. And I think that's one of the advantages that I've had is that when I have an idea, I tend to act on it almost immediately. And the nice thing is that really there's very few things in the digital space or the online space where you lose a ton of money by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
When we started our business, we each put in $1,500. So we started with
Mm-hmm.
sorry, we started with $3,000 when we first got started. And I realized, okay, if this completely bombs and I've thrown away $1,500 of my money, I could probably liquidate it on eBay for, half of that. So maybe I'm at $1,000 total and some time. And to me, $1,000 is a decent risk for a huge reward if you can get
Yes.
a brand off the
Yes.
ground. And I think that's one of the advantages that I've had is that when I have an idea, I tend to just jump and do it. And I don't really think about what's worst case. I'm at $1,000, right? So
Yeah.
so we launched and immediately it took off. I think one, because there wasn't a lot of competition. I used my personal network. I didn't even go to my blog network to promote.
Really
No, because I thought, well, what if I start with my personal network and then go to the blog network? And ended up, I never really promoted it on the blog because we had so many inventory issues for the first maybe 18 months where we couldn't,
interesting.
because that's the problem when you just jump and do something. You also don't have any idea how to do a lot of the important things like inventory management. So we were always sold out. It was just, even to this day, like inventory management is definitely not my strength. But yeah, so we just got started and took off. And
And he
I
was
just,
telling stories about you, like, sitting up all night making jewelry. Like, were you making it
oh
yourself? I
yeah,
mean,
oh well, yeah, because I didn't realize that you could buy it from China already made. I
oh,
I was buying it piecemeal from China. Like,
oh
okay,
my
oh
gosh.
yeah. I mean, that's why jumping in is also bad because you, but I
So
feel
you were
like too,
sitting
you
there,
learn a
like,
lot.
putting the
Oh
diffusers
yeah.
inside and packaging it. Oh
Oh
my
yeah, and with
gosh.
little tweezers, like like these little
Stop
claw.
it.
Oh yeah, and I'm not like a jewelry maker. I mean, I'm kind of crafty, but I'm definitely not like an artisan or anything. And
Oh my
I had
gosh.
my kids. My kids worked that poor Christmas season. Like they did not. I mean, they had a good Christmas because we had a lot of money, but they did not have a good Christmas because they worked up until like December 20th. It was like we'd
Wow.
finish school and I'm like, okay, clear off the table. It's time to make jewelry. And I'd bring everything out and they were putting,
Stop.
oh
That's
yeah.
amazing. And then you guys sold that on Amazon. Is that where that went next?
We went on Amazon and then really quickly, like people, with anything on Amazon, right? People see that it's popular and
Yeah.
then you get the competitor. So we got competitors within like 3 months. We got
Okay.
decent competition. And so I immediately launched the Shopify store, also knowing nothing about Shopify. But I was like,
Jeez
oh,
Louise.
it seems popular. I'll use that one. And so learned how to build the Shopify store. But the cool thing is all of that, like I found it all on YouTube. Like I just watched
Wow.
tutorials and I was like, well, it's just plugging in code, right? Or moving things around. It's not super difficult. And we launched on Shopify, I think within about 6 months. And now we have, Amazon and Shopify. We don't sell anywhere else. We talked
And
about
you're not
other.
making it anymore.
No, thank goodness. Although sometimes I still am because if I see like I saw an opportunity maybe 6 months ago for another product, but I had a lot of excess of certain inventory.
Oh,
And I was
that's
like,
so
oh,
funny.
I'll just switch some stuff around. And then I have like two new products worth current inventory. So I was
That is
this morning. I
hilarious.
was actually right here. I'll show you. I was trying out a new size neck bracelet that we have, but I was like, oh,
That's
let me see if it fits
adorable.
other bands. Yeah,
So okay, so now you have this e-commerce side. You have the blog still going. Is that
yeah. The
still
blog is
something that,
still going. Yep.
and that's something that's like heavily taking your time at the moment?
No, because right now, no. Because blogging's changed so much. I have so much content on there already. It's more just maintaining. I usually do a post a week, which is not
Okay.
doesn't take a
Okay.
ton of time. The e-commerce thing it runs itself pretty much now.
Okay.
I have help obviously with that, and I'm not making jewelry, which is really helpful.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
I can imagine. And then you have two other things going. You've got this profitableaudience.com. So is that the blogging course that you and Steve run?
yes. So
Okay.
we did Seller Summit first.
Okay, okay. So
Um,
Seller Summit came first. So for everyone who doesn't know, Seller Summit is an e-commerce
yep.
conference, which is like to me, I know a lot of different e-commerce and just like as digital marketing experts who make summits and retreats. And it always really boggled my mind that your guys's like sells out every single time really quickly when I'm watching other people like hustling and scrambling.
Yeah.
Why is that? And how did this whole thing come about anyway?
So the whole thing came about because part of the deal when I took Steve's course at a discount was that I had to give him like a very thorough critique on the course. He
Oh,
wanted
okay.
me to give him feedback on, and no one hit him up for this because I don't think he'd ever do this again. He
I
probably
don't
still
think he would.
he probably regrets this because I basically came to him with like pages of notes
That's
of
hysterical.
things he needed to do better. But I will say, like, I'm familiar with other courses. I did feel like his course for e-commerce, like, he just tells you everything you need to know.
Everything you need to know. That's how I
Yeah.
built my business too. And it was like I used it to train in my employees and they run
Yes.
Facebook ads and we've made a lot of money from just his course. Like it was
Yeah.
just seriously golden. So
Yeah. So
that's
the
very
content
funny.
side did not need any help, but the
Correct.
delivery side to me needed a lot of help.
Interesting.
Because when I started it, like, it was hard to find things, and I was like, I want to find this lesson, but I can't find it, and this and that. So he ended up making a lot of changes,
Wow.
probably because I bullied him a little bit, but the content side was always great. And one of the things I felt like was missing for him is I said, and we had this conversation, I said, you just feel very impersonal. You don't feel like a person that I'm connected to. Even I mean, I knew him, but I said, for a person in your class, I feel like there's like a wall between you and that
Mm,
person. And for me, having already run a blog conference for years, one of the things that I felt like was a selling point was feeling like it was a totally even playing field when you showed up to my blog conference. The speakers, the sponsors, the attendees, everybody was the same. No one was bigger or better than anybody else. And I said, I feel like he didn't have that. And I kind of talked him into doing Seller Summit for the, because
really?
I said that's the easiest way to meet people and to connect with your audience is to stand next to them and talk to them.
Yeah.
And for him, he definitely values like his privacy and kind of separating that, but he did realize that that was missing from what he was doing on the e-commerce side. And so we agreed to do the conference together. And I said, listen, if you can
Wow.
just like sell the tickets, I'll put it together. You don't have to, because he's like, I don't know how to
Oh,
run a conference. I don't know how to, get coffee and food. And I was like, I got that. I've already been doing that. And so that's why we started that. So that's, I think, was our 5th year this year, which we obviously did
amazing.
virtually
Right.
because of COVID. And then maybe 2 years ago, he said, all these people in my e-commerce course want a content course, which is not his e-commerce course. His e-commerce course is strictly e-commerce, but he's got all these people that now have, websites with products, but they don't know anything about content or email marketing. And while he covers that to some extent, there's just so much more that you can talk about when it comes to content marketing.
Yeah.
And
Well, I was
he,
looking at your course outline today. It looked like a very clear step by step, like here's what you do, here are the steps, now here's how you monetize it. Like it
yes,
was no fluff. It was very like process oriented.
yes, which is kind of Steve's personality and mine in a way too. And I also feel
Well, it
like
makes it
there's
really easy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there where e-commerce is terrifying, right? Because maybe they don't have $3,000 to get started. Like there's some people that maybe have 50 bucks or $100 to get started. And so
Mm,
the nice thing with like building a website or building a YouTube channel or a podcast is that you can start those for not a lot of money. And
mm-hmm.
so we wanted to be able to create, but he didn't feel like he could do that on his own. He really wanted to work with me because I approach blogging so differently than he does. And he thought,
Yeah.
well, this would be a cool match because I'm really focused on the community side and I do a lot of social media and things like that. And he's very focused on SEO. He's super data driven and I'm super community driven. And he's like, but to really build a successful site, you have to have both. And so we launched that. It's actually about a year since we launched that course, which has been fun because it's cool to see people start with zero. And there's one lady who actually said the other day, she has her site up. She's getting so many page views a month now, and she's got all this content. And it's just exciting to see people, build these businesses that didn't have the resources maybe to start in e-commerce, right? They
That
only
is so
had,
cool. I love that.
$100. So yeah, it's been
Well,
fun.
listen, the one thing I will say, just in general, my feeling from you is that you're just such a real person. You've got a real family. You are talking to people that have like real concerns, whether it's financially or, they might not have the time and things, and you make everything very, broken down. You have experienced so much success yourself. I saw that your blog has been featured in CNN, HLN, ABC, Entrepreneur, Zillow, Clark, Women's Day. I mean, it's just really incredible to see what you've done. So as a person who's done so much both on the family side and also in the business side, what are your just final nuggets of wisdom that you would leave us with? Like what are the core things that you've learned or messages that you would want to give over?
I think first of all, I think the most important thing is you have to, when you get started in any business, is to figure out what your priorities are from day one. For some people, maybe they don't have a family or they don't have kids. And so their priority, they can go all in on their business from day one. And I think that's important to know. Why are you doing what you're doing? And kind of, you don't have to have a full life plan, but just realizing so that when you get to these certain milestones, right? Like the year that we started e-commerce and we were going crazy, at the end of the day, I was able to pull back after the holidays because I didn't want to be working 70 hours a week on my e-commerce store. So I think that's the first thing is, why are you doing this? And then making sure that as you build any business, that you're always staying focused on the reason behind it, because it's very easy to get lost in your business. Because it's fun. It's fun to build something successful. I think the second thing, and this is what I absolutely love about anything online, is I feel like blogging, content, YouTube, e-commerce, it's totally even the playing field. You don't have to have money to get started. You don't have to be, you don't have to have like any special ability to get started. You just have to work hard. And you have to work hard and be willing to learn. And I think if you're willing to do those two things, always learn, always improve the things that you know, improve on what you're doing, and work hard at it, I think anyone can be successful in these types of businesses. It's much harder to start a brick and mortar shop or, create something that isn't, uh, just the online thing to me evens everything out. It evens the playing field for people. And that's what I think is awesome, because as a mom of a lot of kids, I couldn't have just started a store, right? I couldn't have started a pet food store. I wouldn't have been able to do it, right? And there's all these complications with employees and everything else. So I think that's what I love about the online space. And for people that are maybe thinking about getting started, I love the fact that you don't need a lot of money and you don't need to have a lot of like talent or ability. You can learn everything as you go and you can still build a really successful business. So I think those two things to me are probably the most important. And I think the biggest thing is that even once you hit that level of success, continue to educate yourself and continue to learn. Surround yourself. There's that saying that like you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And to me, one of the best things I've ever done in my business is build that and be around that community of people that are also successful, because they're always going to push you and challenge you to question your decisions and push you to make better decisions as you build your business. Because I mean, you got to have that accountability.
That's really good. I love these pieces of advice. I do have actually one final question for you before I ask you how people could find you. And that is that in the world we live in today, there is a complete information overload. People have so many courses, so many people to listen to. Where do people start? How do they block out the noise? How do they know how to actually make this happen for them?
I think the first thing, and I always talk about this in our course, is that think about what you love to do. If you are a person that doesn't want to be in the public eye, if you love the anonymity, then to me, like e-commerce is something that is great because you can be very anonymous in e-commerce. If you love the microphone, if you love video, please go into social media. Please do something where you can shine in that. So I think that's the first thing is you have to look at yourself and say, I think you can learn all those skills, but what are you really good at? I don't know if you've read the book Strength Finders, but it talks about everybody has these core strengths, but then so anyone can learn to play the piano, right? But there's people that are naturally gifted at music. So people that are naturally gifted at music, if that person practices the same amount as the person who's not naturally gifted, the naturally gifted person will always be better. And so think about what you're good at already or what you like to do and move in that direction. And then once you figure that out, if you realize like, hey, I never want to be on video ever for my life, then start researching e-commerce. I have a friend who is an airline pilot and he saw this product or had a product idea and he literally just launched it like 3 months later. But he was like, hey, I can do this. I learned. So he found a course, he Googled, he read the reviews, he picked one, took it. And I think that's the thing. Once you figure out, hey, I'm really passionate about this, or I think I'd be good at that, go for it.
Oh, that's such good advice, Toni. Seriously, I just really appreciate everything that you've said. I know that this is going to be super helpful and inspiring to so many people out there. I am going to put the links to all of your websites in the show notes, but what is the best place for people to connect with you on social media or send you a question or something?
The best place to send me a question is Toni@profitableaudience.com.
Okay.
And that's
And
with an
that's
I.
okay. That's with an I, and that's your the e-commerce, sorry, the course for blogging and how to
Yeah.
create an audience.
That's the one where it
Okay.
won't get lost in all the PR emails. So
Okay. Amazing. And are you on social media anywhere that we can check you out?
I am. Well, yeah. I am on
Lots of
social
places.
media. Yeah. My Facebook page is the happy Facebook at the Happy Housewife. Instagram is actually a good. You can connect with me on Instagram too. It's Toni H Anderson, and that's actually where you can see a little bit of my personal life. I actually use Instagram completely for my personal life and
Hmm.
not as a brand. So yeah, if you want to see pictures of my children and
Yeah,
and
get a little inspiration and see how you're doing what you're doing. That's really
yeah,
awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on, Toni. This has been so much fun.
thank you so much.
Have a great day.